At 2:03 a.m., my office looked like a spaceship drifting in blackout space. Glass walls, muted skyline, and 6 monitors casting a pale blue glow over cold coffee rings, and a stack of unsigned risk reports. The building was mostly empty. The night janitors had finished hours ago, and even the HVAC sounded tired. I was running a routine threat hunt query through our crypto custody environment when one line in the audit stream blinked red. Privileged key access initiated. Source credential VSDRLING CISO. Amount moved $2 million. My credential. My pulse didn't spike, it narrowed. People think panic looks like screaming, but in cybersecurity, panic looks like typing fast with shaking hands and praying the logs lie for you. Mine didn't shake. I slowed down and pulled raw traces, login timestamps, session token origin, browser fingerprint, key vault handshake latency. The access had my username but not my rhythm. After enough years in defense, you learn your own digital body. Token refresh patterns, workstation signatures, command cadence. This wasn't me. Whoever did it got one thing right and one thing wrong. They stole my password, but forgot I noticed breath patterns in code. I was 3 windows deep when my office door unlocked with a soft magnetic click. No knock. My father stepped in like he owned the architecture. Senator Harrison Sterling wore a navy overcoat over a custom suit, tie still perfect at 2 a.m., silver hair combed like a campaign ad. Behind him came Julian, my younger brother, jaw tight, hoodie wrinkled, eyes bloodshot in that familiar way that meant he had either been crying or losing. With Julian, it was usually both. Dad glanced at my screens and said, "You found it." Not what happened. Not "are you okay," just "you found it." I leaned back and asked, "How long have you known?" Julian jumped in first, too quickly. Listen," I cut him off. "Don't call me that when you're lying." He flinched. Dad stepped closer, hands behind his back like he was addressing a committee. "Your brother made a mistake. $2 million is not a mistake, it's a plan with bad luck. He used my credentials," I said. Julian rubbed his face and confessed in fragments. He borrowed my tablet, saw my password manager open, moved funds temporarily, planned to return them after a gambling hit. "I had markers," he said. "They were threatening me." There it was, the family script. Julian detonates, Veronica contains blast radius, Dad protects the family name. Repeat. I turned to my father. "You didn't come here for forgiveness, say the rest." He placed a slim black envelope on my desk and pushed it toward me. Inside were fabricated terminal screenshots, fake transfer authorizations, and a chain of planted forensic artifacts pointing to my company laptop as the theft origin. Not enough to survive a full forensic review, but more than enough for headlines, subpoenas, and a career funeral. "Fix this," Dad said softly. "Hide the logs, normalize the transaction trail." By morning, this theft is an accounting anomaly, not a felony. I stared at him. He held my gaze and flattened his voice. If I refused, the evidence would go public before sunrise, to the board, regulators, and press. I'd be charged, I'd go to prison, Julian would cooperate, and he would remain senator. No tremor, no shame. He was telling me the weather. Julian whispered, "He doesn't mean that." Dad didn't look at him. "I do." Something old moved inside me then, like a file opening from childhood. I was 11, debugging campaign donation sheets, while Dad said I was gifted, and Julian was good with people. I was 14, ghostwriting Julian's CS assignment while he partied. I was 19, deleting photos from a staffer's phone before Scandal could breathe. Year after year, same equation. My intelligence wasn't admired, it was extracted. I looked again at the planted evidence. Too clean for Julian. Dad had help. This wasn't about saving my brother. This was about forcing me into obstruction, tampering, conspiracy, and permanent leverage. If I cleaned this once, I'd clean it forever. Dad mistook my silence for surrender. Good. "I knew you'd be rational." I closed the envelope and set it beside my keyboard. "I can suppress anomaly alerts and reroute investigative triggers," I said. "But not from here," Julian's hope flickered. "So you'll do it?" I softened my face just enough. "If I do this, you follow instructions exactly. No improvising," Dad nodded. "Name it." I told them there was a hardened server cluster in our West Side disaster recovery farm, air-gapped admin shell. I could stage a reconciliation package and deploy remotely. I typed a time and rotated the monitor. 9:00 a.m. they would log in from home. I'd send a secure key. Julian would execute one command only. And then, Julian asked. Then the trail dies, I said. Dad exhaled, pleased. That's my daughter, I almost laughed. No, Senator, that's your assumption. After they left, the office went quiet. Monitor hum, distant elevator cables, my own breathing finally audible in the dark. I opened a fresh terminal, created a sandbox, and labeled it HNYTRP Sterling. Honeypot architecture, dual-trigger telemetry, forensic mirroring, immutable ledger copy, federal escalation bridge. I wasn't writing a cover-up. I was writing a confession they would execute themselves. By 2:49 a.m., the first build was encrypted and the cursor blinked like a patient fuse. 9:00 a.m. Works for me, I whispered into the empty room. By 6:10, the skyline had turned from black glass to dull steel, and my office smelled like burnt coffee and overheated processors. I hadn't slept. My contact lenses felt like sandpaper, but my hands were steady, the one part of me that never lies. Outside my glass wall, junior analysts drifted in with gym bags and expensive fatigue. They waved. I nodded like any other Tuesday existed. Inside my terminal, I built the trap. To untrained eyes, it looked like incident response triage, chain of custody shims, reconciliation scripts, audit compaction, the ugly backend cleanup every CISO knows. But code is language, and I am fluent in double meaning. Line by line, I wrote the opposite of erasure. A mirrored ledger packet that could not be altered, a hidden beacon stitched into transaction metadata. A timed execution gate requiring manual input from the theft endpoint, and a forensic heartbeat mapping device fingerprint, network path, and geolocation with courtroom-grade granularity. Then I added the crown jewel, a federal tracer hook disguised as debt wipe utility, routed into channels monitored by agencies that hate surprises, FBI Cyber and SEC Enforcement. I named the function something Julian would trust, clear marker debt. He'd never read past the name anyway. At 7:02, Dad texted, status. I replied, building scrub sequence, isolated execution at 900, no delays. He answered, do not fail me, Veronica. Translation, do not stop serving me. I hardened the tracer module twice. As scripts compiled, memory opened like a bruise. Dad calling me his secret weapon at 13 while I fixed donor totals he claimed were formatting issues. Julian begging me at 16 to alter dash telemetry after a drunk crash. Dad asking me at 23 to review, a leaked voicemail, where review meant delete and delete meant bury. Every yes was brilliant. Every hesitation was selfish. By 8:01 the build was complete. I ran full simulations. Julian's wipe command produced success. Ledger CLEANED on screen, while underneath the payload forked. Mirror locked, tracer fired, escalation queued with full forensic packet. I tested it 3 more times. Never trust beautiful code until you've tried to break it yourself. At 8:20, I packed a small HR cardboard box. Framed team photo, 2 hardware tokens, shield-shaped stress ball, fountain pen from my first board appointment, employee badge on top. Not resignation. Exfiltration. I had already booked a one-way first-class seat to Zurich and accepted a new role at a Swiss infrastructure firm that believed security should defend systems, not dynasties. Start date immediate. I printed nothing, forwarded nothing, sent no dramatic email. People who survive this world know one rule: leave quietly, log everything. At 8:37 Julian called. You did it, he asked, voice bright with desperate hope. I told him I built a single-use scrub key. He must log in at exactly 9:00 from Dad's home office machine, not his laptop. Why his? He asked. Path consistency, I lied. You want one story in the audit trail, he cursed. Dad's freaking out. I said, then don't improvise. He hesitated. After this, we're good, right? I looked at the city catching first sun. We were never good, Julian. We were just unfinished. I sent the encrypted key with final instructions. Run at 090000, paste only this command, do not interrupt process. At 8:49, Dad called. Confirm this ends today. I answered. It ends at 9:00. He paused. You're doing the right thing. I almost admired the audacity. In his vocabulary, right and wrong were seasonal, only useful and not useful existed. I ended the call, wiped the device with a dead man timer, and slid it into my coat pocket. By 8:55, I was in a private elevator descending to the parking garage, box under one arm, laptop bag over my shoulder, expression unreadable in mirrored steel. The smartest person in the room is not the loudest. She is the one who decides where the room ends. At 8:59, in a black town car racing toward O'Hare, I opened my tablet and watched the countdown. 08:59, 41, 08:59, 52, 08:59, 58. At 09:00:00, the first handshake pinged, Sterling Residence Network Home Office Workstation Elevated Privileges. Julian was in. Clear marker det, initiated. I watched the progress bar crawl, serene as a surgeon, then sent one final message. Good luck. Don't touch anything. He replied with a thumbs up emoji. I stared at it for a long second and muted his thread forever. At 9:03, airport glass turned the sun into polished knives. I sat in O'Hare's International Lounge near the far window, surrounded by low conversations, perfume, leather, rolling suitcases, and people flying toward meetings that would not end in handcuffs. My telemetry dashboard pulsed beside untouched cold espresso. Execution 41%. Source, Sterling Residence. User, active. For once in his life, Julian followed directions. At 9:04, my phone began vibrating hard enough to walk across the table. Dad, I let it ring out. Julian, Dad again. On the fourth call, my dashboard flashed amber. Anomaly escalation armed, federal channel handshake pending. I answered Dad on speaker. He was already shouting. What did you do? I said. In what sense? He yelled about the red screen, federal statutes, secondary auth. I told him to read it exactly. Paper rustled, breathing, Julian cursing in background. Dad read aloud. Unauthorized ledger manipulation detected, mirrored for enforcement review, reporting trigger. Reporting to who? He snapped. Progress bar 68%. I asked, is Julian touching the keyboard? Julian shouted, it froze, I can't close it. Dad's voice cracked, make it stop. Then the next lines appeared, FBI cyber endpoint connected. SEC encrypted intake established. I gave him the sentence he had earned. I didn't erase the crime, I broadcasted it. Silence hit like impact, then rage. Dad shouted that I had implicated his household in a federal cyber event. I told him he implicated it when he planted evidence on my machine and forced obstruction. Julian grabbed the phone, panic stripped raw. I'll pay it back, send cancel code. I said there was no cancel code. He cried, angry and breathless. Dad returned in politician voice, accusing me of extortion and cyberterrorism, false flag, promising to destroy me. I smiled without humor. You taught me to document everything. Then I hung up. At 9:08, my tablet flashed crimson. Possible active intrusion pattern resembling attack on financial infrastructure. Origin Sterling Residence IP. Escalation immediate. I had designed the trigger to resemble live offensive behavior once Julian tried to interrupt. Julian always interrupts. Addicts trust shortcuts more than warnings. Lounge TVs flipped to breaking red banners about a developing cyber incident. My burner buzzed with unknown federal numbers. I ignored them. At 9:10, two plainclothes men entered the lounge scanning faces with that predatory calm reserved for authorized ruin. Not for me yet. I stood, took my coat, moved toward gate M18. Calls exploded again. Dad, 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 Julian unknown. I answered Julian once more. He was sobbing. Black SUVs were outside. Tell them it was you. Tell them this is a test. I kept my voice flat. If they ask, tell the truth. He choked out a bitter laugh. Dad said you'd never choose strangers over blood. There it was, the family religion. I watched planes taxi through morning haze and said, blood is chemistry, choice is character. then I hung up. At 9:13, motion sensors tripped around Sterling residence perimeter, multiple synchronized entries, comms bursts consistent with federal tactical approach. Dad's Wi-Fi node dropped, returned, dropped again, then blacked out. Source connection terminated. I exhaled for what felt like the first time all morning. Minutes later, major networks ran aerial shots of a Georgetown street choked with black vehicles and flashing lights. No names yet, just the shape of consequences. Boarding for Zurich began, civilization cued by status tiers while an empire collapsed 700 miles away. In line, my old phone lit with one final text from Dad. "You are dead to me." I looked at it and felt nothing, no triumph, no grief, only completion. I powered the phone down and dropped it into the lounge recycling bin. Plastic on metal. Small sound, large ending. In seat 2A, cabin smelling of pressed linen and citrus, I buckled in with the same steady hands I had at 2 a.m. As we pushed back, my tablet received one final ping, Operation HNYTRP Sterling complete. Evidence package delivered, chain of custody locked, external access revoked. I closed my eyes as engines rose like weather. Somewhere behind me, over state lines and satellite feeds, the House of Sterling learned what every system learns eventually: when you force the firewall to defend your crimes. Don't be surprised when it chooses the network instead. By the time we crossed the Atlantic, my family was a headline. I watched with volume off: federal raid at senator's home, cyber intrusion tied to private network, financial crime unit investigating. Muted chaos is still chaos. You can read it in shoulders, in mouth-shaping denials before questions end, in men unused to consequence relearning where to place their hands. Dad stood on the steps without tie, podium, or flags, suddenly smaller without lighting. Julian was led in zip ties, face blotched, eyes unfocused. I expected vindication. I felt exact, like a math equation finally balanced. I reviewed the forensic digest again. Theft route authenticated under stolen credentials, divergence proving non-origin from my stack, coercion timeline preserved. Honeypot execution from Sterling residence at 09:00:00, manual interference triggering escalation branch, federal intake confirmed with immutable hash chain. No gaps, no miracle, just architecture. A flight attendant asked when I wanted dinner. After, I said. Alone in cabin reflection, I saw ringed eyes and a jaw that once meant strength. Now it felt like withdrawal. For 35 years I had been the family's emergency patch: fix Julian, fix Dad, fix optics, fix damage before dawn. Even with them in custody, part of me waited for the next call. It never came. At 34,000 feet, silence can sound like grief. Somewhere over Greenland, I drafted 2 letters. One to company counsel and board audit committee with sealed timeline, legal references, whistleblower request, privilege surrender, and cooperation offer. One to Dad and Julian through counsel: I will testify truthfully, I will not recant, do not contact me again. No anger, no flourish, just boundary as protocol. Zurich arrived in thin dawn gradients, gray, silver, then disciplined blue. Airport air smelled of roasted coffee and clean stone. The driver held a sign: Sterling v. Long flight, he asked. Long decade, I said. He laughed politely, not understanding, and opened the door. The city passed in orderly frames: tram lines, river light, old facades beside mirrored towers, built by people who trusted systems more than speeches. At the temporary apartment, I showered, opened my laptop, and found 37 unread emails. Reporters, legal notices, and 3 messages from family friends, fishing for narrative control. I archived the 3 without opening. At 11:40 local, a federal liaison called on encrypted line. They asked clearly, I answered clearly. No revenge speech. Just chain of custody, coercion, technical mechanics, motive indicators. The agent said my documentation was unusually complete. I looked at rain gathering on the window and said, I was raised by men who taught me never to leave fingerprints. That night, I walked by the river with hot coffee in my hands. Church bells folding into traffic noise, cyclists cutting through mist. No one knew my last name. No one cared who my father was. For the first time in years, anonymity didn't feel like exile, it felt like oxygen. A week later, arraignment footage went public. Dad was charged with conspiracy, obstruction, and financial cybercrime facilitation. Julian faced wire fraud, unauthorized key theft, and federal intrusion enhancements for live interference. Their attorneys called it political targeting. Analysts called it catastrophic stupidity. I called it inevitable, because schemes built on entitlement always include one fatal bug. They assume the smartest person in the room will stay loyal to abuse. On my first Monday at Helvetia Grid Security, I entered a glass conference room over the limit. New threat map glowing on the wall. No family names, no favors, no hidden cleanups. The CEO asked my security philosophy. I answered, systems fail when truth is optional. He nodded once. Good. Build us one that doesn't. That evening, I emptied my coat pockets into a drawer, transit pass, apartment key, fountain pen, and found one final relic. The muted Sterling family group, chat still pinned from habit. I opened the silent thread and deleted it. No archive, no backup, no restore. Outside, lights came on one by one, reflecting in river water like code compiling in the dark. I stood at the window and watched Zurich glow steady, indifferent, and understood the lesson my father never did. They thought I was the firewall protecting them. They forgot that firewalls also burn.